The system of government, which was fashioned by the delegates to the Constitutional Convention in the summer of 1787, was a practical application of ideals which James Madison established mainly in theory and law. Madison, like most of the framers of the American Constitution, was preoccupied with the ideal of limited government. Their experiences with the British Crown had taught them that the best way to limit the power of government was to structure it in such a way as to prevent the accumulation of too much political power in the hands of one individual or one group of individuals. Separation of powers was one of the structural mechanisms incorporated into the Constitution that serves to decentralize political power. For Madison, limited prudent government basically meant that institutional arrangements should be based on the principle of countervailing and balanced powers. Specifically, the principle involves the assumption that there are three intrinsically distinct types of political power: the legislative power, or the power to make laws, the executive power, or the power to execute or enforce the laws, and the judicial power, or the power to adjudicate or decide cases based on the law. Madison argued that there should be three distinct branches of government to exercise each type of political power. The Founding Fathers found it desirable to separate political powers into three separate branches of government for two reasons. One, to keep to a minimum the powers lodged in any single organ of government, and two, to be able to oppose each organ of government against the others. This latter principle is often referred to as checks and balances. Checks and balances means that each branch of government possesses some kind of veto power over the others. At a minimum, each branch must be able to protect its own independence arising from its unique constitutional powers. The chief purpose of checks and balances, according to Madison, is the protection of minority and individual rights. True to their classical liberal preferences and values, the American Founding Fathers inherently distrusted any government of concentrated powers. Such governments were the very definition of tyranny. For the early Americans, tyranny meant the loss of individual rights and freedoms. Thus, the Madisonian model aims at preventing popular majorities from getting control of government and turning it towards their own ends. In this vein, Madison warns of the tyranny of the majority, the momentary passions of the people, and mob rule. So various barricades were erected against majority rule, including the indirect election of the president and senators and the appointment of judges. Therefore, the requirements of bicameralism, the presidential veto, and the power of judicial review were all mechanisms designed to thwart popular majorities and preserve individual and minority rights. The concept of separation of powers held by Madison and the other founders then can be summed up in the following propositions. 1. There are three intrinsically distinct types of political power: legislative, executive, and judicial. 2. These three types of political power ought to be exercised by three separate branches of government, which should be constitutionally independent from and equal to the others. And 3. There should be an overlapping of functions to ensure that each branch will check and balance the others. The framers understood the consequences of their framework. They preferred protracted action, even stalemate, to efficiency in government. They did not want a government which could act quickly. A government with the ability to act quickly or efficiently, even when circumstances might seem to make those values appropriate, was also a government that could act quickly and efficiently to take away individual and minority rights. They did not propose indefinite deadlock, but they did prefer government wait until such a popular consensus was built up in favor of some action that all of the separated institutions would have been brought into agreement.